So how will the Democrats' presidential candidate change at the national level, how will that impact local elections in Washington state? Will it actually have much of an impact at all on the primary elections that are coming up in August, in which people are actually already voting just right now? What should we be looking for in the election results this coming up August, this primary? Now, and I also think we should just revisit the 2024 election from a Washington state perspective and then see how the political drama and this national activity give us some foreshadowing of potential future results here where we live. Now, before we get into the chaos and the drama and the countdown to the 2024 elections in Washington state, I just want to encourage you to subscribe to our channel, hit like and share this video with others down below. It doesn't cost you anything but a few seconds of your time. But I think that by doing so, you can help me continue to annoy the political leadership in our state and hopefully encourage more people to engage locally in practical ways to have a positive impact on our future and the future that we hope to leave for our children. Again, as I said, it just costs you nothing to subscribe, only a few seconds of your time. Your friends will often appreciate these videos if you share them as well. And if you do want to financially support any of our efforts here, you can do so in the video description down below. I have a link down there. As always, everything is appreciated. So now let's get back to the 2024 election drama. First of all, top of mind for most political junkies right now is the obvious cascade of chaos that's been unleashed by the National Democrat Party's switcheroo at the top of their ticket. And that really is the biggest story right now. I can't exaggerate the chaotic significance and just unusual nature of this event in U.S. political history. Remember, for years, we've all been lied to by the traditional media, the Democrat Party, and all their supporters that Biden wasn't in the mental decline that he obviously was. We were told to trust them and not to trust our own eyes. The Democratic Party rigged their primary process earlier this year to ensure that Biden kind of sailed through without any serious opposition and certainly no debate. Now, we've seen these kind of rigged primaries before. In fact, if you just look at the 2016 primary for the Democrats, where Bernie Sanders was actually shut out by very well-documented insider games, and then again in the 2020 insider maneuvers to ensure that basement Biden actually got the seal of approval. But that is predictable and expected behavior from this crew. We've actually seen this story before, and we expect to see more of it in the future. What's really sort of unusual is the fact that nothing apparently saves democracy more than ignoring the 15 million Democrat voters who actually supported Biden in the primaries, and then dumping Biden after a predictable fiasco at an early debate with Trump. And then overnight, suddenly swapping him out with the VP, Kamala Harris, who couldn't even get 1% in her own failed presidential effort in 2020. Now, of course, we are expected to believe that Biden is now incapable of running for office. But at the same time, we're told to believe that his staff can keep up the kind of weekend at Bernie's facade and this smokescreen for him to kind of still occupy the seat of president until at least January, or at least long enough to kind of get those pardons and the cash transfers to his family completed. Now, part of what made this weirder was the fact that Biden really didn't make any public statement about this sudden change of direction, but his staff launched the announcement using his X kind of Twitter account, which is now most of his supporters, that's basically how most of them discovered this sudden swap at the last minute. Now, we're really in a surreal Twilight Zone political world where the exact same people who wanted us to believe Biden was competent, mentally fit, and sharp enough to be president just a few days ago, now they want us to forget that. And now we are instructed to believe that the unpopular, very weird Kamala, who basically couldn't convince even 1% of Democrats in America that she was the best choice for president just a few years ago, well, now suddenly, despite her failures as vice president, which is kind of amazing. I mean, how do you even fail a job title like that? Now she's the only one. Okay, it's their party, and you and I, of course, we don't have a say in what they do to themselves. And of course, we also know that the 15 million Democratic Party voters who wasted their time and votes participating in the kabuki theater of the primary earlier this year, they don't matter either. In fact, the only ones that matter over there are the elite political insiders who really do control the process and can clearly dump sitting American presidents when their poll numbers hit rock bottom, and then just pretend that the primary process never happened. Now this, my friends, is what protecting democracy absolutely looks like, Democrat Party style anyway. Now, of course, this whole fiasco is absurd, and frankly, it's unprecedented in modern times. I know this, you know this, everybody knows this, but we're being asked to pretend that this is normal. And this is on top of the failed assassination attempt on Trump's life just over a week ago. Yes, we are really living in interesting times. So how will this impact where I live in Washington State? How does it seem that this will impact the 2024 elections in our state, which typically really isn't defined as a swing state by anybody? Our state won't get big infusions of national cash to influence the presidential elections either way. So how does this drama likely make an impact right here? Now let's dive into that. First of all, Washington State already had our presidential primary election for both the Republican and the Democrat parties a few months ago. But, of course, only the Democratic Party's vote for Biden, right here, actually, up here, will be tossed into the garbage and, of course, the memory hole, as it vanishes as though it never happened. Donald Trump is the Republican nominee, and technically Joe Biden is still the Democratic nominee at this time, at least according to the laws in place right now. But can the Democrats basically find a way to swap out their primary presidential candidate? And the answer is probably. If they don't royally screw up the process, according to Washington state law, the final date to formally have the ballot information to print for the November election is actually going to be August 22nd. That's according to Steve Hobbs, our Secretary of State. And the reason for this early date is really because we are foolishly an entrenched and entirely mail-in ballot state. And, of course, the ballots must be printed early enough to be sent to the overseas voters like deployed military and other UCAVA voters. Now, by law, all of our state ballots essentially need to be the same, of course, so we can't send out one type to them and one to others, but we're running into these hard deadlines and potential conflicts because the Democrat Party at the National Convention is currently scheduled to end August 22nd, same day as our deadline here in the state. They have to, in theory, nominate the presidential candidate by that time. Now, my prediction right now is that regardless of how sloppy or legally questionable the Democrats' presidential candidate swap-drop kind of drama becomes, the Democrats who control all levers of political power right now in Washington state will bend over backwards to accommodate this kind of last-minute weird political insider, this kind of last-minute swap, whether it really ends up being Kamala Harris or just some other insider pick in August. But will this D.C. drama impact our primary here in Washington state, which involves all the down-ticket political races from governor down to county commissioner? Now, maybe, but not as much as it's going to impact the November election results, in my opinion. Washington state's main primary election is coming up here in a couple weeks on August 6th of this year. Now, at the time I'm actually recording this video, most people have already received the ballots. Probably you have already. And if history is any guide, many people have already completed their ballots and either dropped them off directly at their local auditor's offices, as I just did a few days ago, or they're kind of rolling the dice with the U.S. Post Office, where it's anybody's guess if it actually ends up in the right place at the right time. Most ballots get delivered, of course, but some might end up in the ditch or maybe a dumpster when people steal the mail or postal carriers get frustrated with their working conditions. Always a risk. Now, here's what I would look at if just looking at our participation coming up to just see how the weekend at Biden's House drama might impact the election turnout. If you look at this chart right here, you can see that the primary election turnout for each presidential years since 2008. And the lowest turnout was actually in 2016 with 34% of the vote. And then the highest was the last time Biden and Trump were on the ballot in the middle of the COVID lockdown world in 2020 with a high of 54%. Now, most years have primary election turnout numbers somewhere in between these two recent extremes. So I suspect that if the turnout numbers are lower than 40%, we can assess some level of reduced voter turnout numbers because Trump isn't on the ballot and neither is whoever the Democrat parties, whoever they've chosen to install for their candidate. Now, political junkies will want to dig deeper and see if this reduced level of voter turnout actually skews towards one party or the other, of course. Maybe it's deflated enthusiasm on one side. But one challenge with this analysis is the fact that voters in Washington state, we really don't register by party affiliation, and we haven't done that since 1934. So this means there's a bit of guesswork and data analysis to understand the party affiliation of those who vote or who don't vote, with kind of a large batch of independents usually miscategorized by both sides. Now, I have a second video coming up where I'm going to be breaking down my predictions and likely outcomes in various races around Washington State in the 2024 primary itself, probably next week. But for the purpose of this video, we can see how voter turnout models in the primary could be impacted by the leadership chaos on the Democrat side of the equation. Now, I would watch the results of the 5th Congressional District closely in August. This is the furthest eastern Washington congressional district. It includes Spokane, and it's been represented by Republican Congresswoman Cathy Morris Rogers since 2004. Her departure from Congress really opened up that seat with no incumbent for the first time in a couple decades. So it was an early kind of food fight among a lot of Republican candidates, with 6 sticking it out for the final battle here in August. Now remember, Washington State has a jungle primary process, which means the top 2 vote getters essentially exit the primary and then move on to the general election, regardless of party affiliation. However, there are 4 Democrats in this race, and this district does lean Republican. This is actually one of the congressional seats where it is possible, distantly possible, but it's possible that 2 Republicans could make it to the ballot if the Democrats both split the vote and have depressed voter turnout at the same time. Now, again, this is a Republican-leaning congressional district, so I believe a Republican most likely will win the seat regardless. But if 2 Republicans manage to get more votes than any of the Democrat candidates, that could be a real indicator that there was lower turnout than normal for Democrats in that district, at least. Now, a similar scenario could play out in the 4th Congressional District, which is kind of next door to the 5th. It's another Republican-heavy district in eastern Washington with all the intra-party infighting, of course, on the Republican side and anemic activity on the Democrat side. If the Democrats can't get one of their credible kind of sort of, I'm going to put credible in parentheses, their candidates through the primary in this district as well, that would be an indication of lower than normal voter turnout on their flavor of politics, at least in that district. Now, I would also suggest just a close look at the 39 county turnout numbers for some of the low drama kind of statewide races. For example, in the state treasurer and the state auditor races, there's only 2 candidates running in the primary. One is clearly identified as Republican and the other one is identified as Democrat in both those races. So if the Republicans in these races get higher than, I'd say, about 48%, that will be significant and indicate a lower Democrat or at least an inspired Republican vote turnout. That's kind of important to know. However, well, I will discuss the primary election in more detail in that next video, probably next week. These are the basic things that I'd be watching for as the August 6 results kind of trickle in, as election department employees in King County discover more lost boxes of ballots in, of course, maybe in their harvesting operations in homeless camps and elsewhere. The voters who actually turn out or fail to turn out in the primary will impact the get-out-the-vote strategies for the left-wing groups who manage these operations later in November. And the enthusiasm gap between the 2 sides, it actually can change the final outcome in just some of these very close races. The real impact, however, is likely to be seen, in my opinion, in the November election results. But it isn't clear to me that the Democrats' leadership chaos and collapse is enough to change election voter turnout enough at the state level to impact the presidential election here. I mean, let's face it, if Trump actually won Washington State, that would be so shocking that I suspect Seattle would probably burn itself to the ground in kind of a fit of rage. And I would be doing a whole bunch of videos about the shocking results if that happens. Now, but I kind of expect the lackluster chaos at the top. It could depress voter turnout in some key areas of the state, and that'll kind of have a real impact on the final election results. And specifically, when I'm talking about that in November, really this is most likely to be seen in a variety of more rural state House districts that currently are occupied by politicians who self-identify as Democrat. And remember, Washington State has 49 of these districts spread over 39 counties. Not all of them are in play in 2024, but some certainly are, and they're worth watching. These actually include the 42nd District in North Whatcom. It includes the 10th Legislative District in Whidbey Island and Skagit County. And, of course, it also includes the 24th District out on the Olympic Peninsula. Now, these are battleground districts that are generally trending Republican or who have facilitated. This is the 42nd. This is actually the 10th. This here's the 24th. This is the 5th. And this is the 30th in Federal Way. Now, I basically these districts have trended Republican. They've vacillated kind of back and forth with just narrow victories for either side. I would also encourage you on one of these is also to pay attention to the 5th legislative district, which includes Eastern King County and even the 30th leg district in Federal Way, because there really could be surprise results in these districts, really depending on who turns out. Now, these are the most obvious state legislative districts to swing if there's nothing exciting at the top of the Democrat Party ticket to drive voter turnout on the left. I mean, let's face it, even with mega vote harvesting operations, you can really only overcome low motivation so much. At the other side of the equation is actually the significant motivation of the Let's Go Washington 4-pack of initiatives, which is easily promoted and sold under the Vote Yes, Pay Less campaign. It's a great slogan. And these tax-cutting and cost-cutting measures for regular people in the state, they're going to inspire more people in November, regardless of party affiliation, to come out and vote just to save themselves some money. I mean, those types of people are probably more likely to vote down ticket for Republican candidates and more fiscally conservative politicians, at least in theory. Remember, in November, it won't be the president at the top of the ballot in Washington state. The first 4 options for voters in Washington state in November are going to be these 4 initiatives that all cut the cost of living for regular people in Washington state. And with the current inflation trend and the cost of living increases over the past few years, most people are motivated to find ways to reduce their own costs. This will include giving people the option to opt out of the long-term payroll tax, which is I-2124. This tax was so awesome, and the program it created was such a fiasco that even the supporters know that most people will not want to waste their money on this basically a scam. Another one will be the Initiative 2117, which will repeal Governor Inslee's foolish and expensive carbon tax scam, which increases the cost of fuel and energy for everybody in Washington state. Repealing this dumb tax is going to save everybody money, and it's very popular. There will also be I-2066, which is the recently approved initiative to the people, repealing the Democrat Party's effort to eventually ban natural gas, and, of course, also increase the cost of energy. This was a very unpopular piece of insider lobbyist legislation in which over 500,000 Washingtonians ended up signing an initiative to repeal that stupidity and more aspects of that law and then let them keep their gas stoves. And so I think this initiative is going to be very popular as well. And then, of course, finally, the repeal of the capital gains tax, which is I-2109. It's also popular because most people realize it is just a backdoor policy to increase income tax in Washington state, which is absolutely not popular with regular people. So to recap, when it comes to our state's November elections, I think the D.C. leadership vacuum drama and chaos in the Democrat Party side of things, it may depress some left-leaning kind of voter turnout in some areas. Seattle's always going to vote against Trump. That's their priority. But in these other areas, there's a lot of obsessed Trump derangement syndrome in the Seattle area and, of course, other urban pockets around the state. But I can't see that most of these people won't vote just because they hate Trump. They will probably vote for anything the Dems sell them to vote for. Now, I think hatred's a powerful motivator for some people, and Seattle Democrats sure hate Trump. But outside of that, kind of these urban pockets of homeless camps, political corruption, and then high crime rates, I suspect reduced voter turnout reductions, they're going to be basically having a greater partisan impact in the more rural areas. That's what I would guess. Mostly it would impact the makeup of the Washington state legislature, probably the Washington State Senate, and possibly one congressional seat. Now, another demotivator on the Democrat Party side of the equation is Bob Ferguson, who's running for governor, and he's just not a popular guy. Well, he is trying to buy love and votes with his tuna chicken checks and other abuses of his tenure at the AG office to kind of shake down businesses for cash that he can then use to buy and influence votes. It really isn't clear yet that this program is going to work for him. I mean, secondly, he's actually been so nasty to the Democrats that there are large pockets of resistance, even among insider Democrats, who just plain don't like Ferguson. Then finally, he just doesn't have great name recognition right now. Political insiders know him, but not a lot of other people do. And the last time that we had a Democrat candidate running with such low name recognition was actually in 2004 when Attorney General Gregoire ran and barely won. And I put won in quotation marks because that was the infamous election where Gregoire lost the first 2 counts, and only after secret stashes of ballots were found in Democrat election worker car trunks did she actually win that race. Now, on the other side of the voter motivator equation is going to be these 4 initiatives, which I believe will inspire a lot of people to vote just to save themselves money in November. There is a subset of voters who despise politicians and they don't trust anyone and they're maybe unlikely to vote. But I think they're likely to vote in this case just to vote yes on all 4 initiatives. And then, of course, some of them, since they're filling out their ballot, will just vote for more fiscally conservative politicians after that. Now, usually, not always, but usually those choices would include larger groups of Republicans than Democrats. I mean, I would actually weigh the initiatives as a more heavily positive weighted support for more conservative people voting than I would weigh the Biden D.C. drama as kind of a negative impact on Washington State's kind of left-leaning voter turnout models. Now, I could be wrong, but that's how it looks to me. And at this time, this is what it looks like to most other people that I've actually discussed this topic with as well. It's notoriously difficult, actually, to predict voter turnout depression models and the impact of partisan apathy on the actual election results, especially this far in advance. But the primary election results, just in a few weeks, will probably send just a little bit more light, maybe shine a little bit more light on it, and hopefully it'll help us tighten up our forecast just a bit. Regardless, in addition to whoever survives the jungle primary food fight, I would, again, very much pay attention to those August turnout numbers, the final numbers, and we can probably get a pretty good sense on how important turnout is going to be impacted by the D.C. leadership vacuum and kind of the drama that we're witnessing back there right now. Regardless of my predictions, most of these August elections are local, and your participation will certainly help shift the needle, hopefully in the favor of politicians who care about liberty and freedom and downsizing the abusive bureaucracy in Washington State. However, you can only have an impact if you bother to engage. And while voting is important, it's hardly the only thing that you should be doing. Once you've delivered your ballot, your neighbor's ballot, and your friend's ballot to your local auditor's office, you can also work hard to make sure everyone you know has also voted and get their ballots into that office as well. You can volunteer to collect their completed and signed ballots and deliver them yourself. This is called ballot harvesting, and under our stupid state's policies, ballot harvesting is perfectly legal. However, the most important thing is you must show up, because if you just sit back, you whine, you cry, and you prepare for the apocalypse, you're simply not impacting the future at all. You have to engage and do something to make an impact, even if it's just a small one right now, because the future belongs to those who show up.